clear that I am absolutely responsible for my audience. If you want to, look out for people who are red flags, it's definitely people who had my mentality that say, I'm not responsible for what my audience does.
I completely agree. And there are so many fucking content creators out there that just leave that at the door. They like turn on, they go in their computer and they do their content and do this. And the second they're offline, they just like let the snowball go down the hill. You are absolutely responsible for your audience and what they're saying and doing and what's happening in different discords and stuff. You have to. No one else can be. You are the mother that birthed that audience, right? They are a reflection of you. It makes me sick to think of like what you guys might say and do in other channels. That's why I'm like very strict here, right?
The iDubbbz apology made waves, and not just amongst people who disagree with what he was saying. There are those who agree, and maybe even take things a step further. Are you responsible for the actions of people who look at your posts? My man at the start said yes, just blanket, flat out, yes. Because who else is there to take responsibility? I don't know, maybe the person taking the action. But you influenced them. And because you had an unmeasured degree of influence on them, you are responsible. You take the blame or credit for any action they take. Here's a realistic scenario if we're talking about people watching you and then going to bother people on Discord. You say someone's name. An audience member becomes aware of their existence, hates them for some reason, and attacks them. Couldn't have happened without you informing them of their existence. That's absolutely true. You influenced them, made something happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Your fault. On the nicer flip side, I guess, I tell you about a new lottery. You enter it and win. I get the money. Couldn't have happened without me. I'm responsible for that. So this is... what's the word? Insane. Even taking it as a simplified appraisal of a complex situation, cliff notes of a more robust take, it is cooked. Are you responsible for an audience's actions? Depends. If you're spreading disinformation that leads to action, yeah, probably. There's a significant degree of responsibility in the outcome there. Direct incitement to a specific action? Okay, sure. But anything else, it gets unbelievably complicated. Putting out negative vibes that resonate with viewers, as iDubbbz was describing it in his apology, that's mysticism and guesswork. You don't even know if you nudged the people you're looking at to be a certain way, or if they came here because they are a certain way. They could have been worse, and your milder negative vibes actually had a moderating influence on them in a way paused vibes wouldn't, because they'd have just rejected a positive content creator. This is the first barrier. You don't actually know what influence you're having on an audience. No, I know, dude. I did this and then saw people doing something related. I've streamed for a long time. I've made videos for a long time. Okay, cool. I clapped my hands twice, and it thundered each time. I caused thunder with my claps. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm right. There's correlation. But that's all you really have. For all you know, they were going to do what they did anyway. Maybe just to a different target, and anyone you'd mention would get it that day. Maybe if they'd watched someone else would have gotten it. Let's say you're right though. And people are doing things they wouldn't have unless they watched your video. Here's barrier 2. Are they reasonable? Or is their reaction to what you showed them reasonable? Would a normal person behave like that in response to consuming your content? Well, most people who watch a video don't post it, share it, talk about it. This means anyone you're identifying as part of a community or audience on the basis of their posts about it is already outside the norm. So, you're measuring your influence on an audience by looking at the behavior of a very small percentage of unusual people. What you actually say and do are only a small part of what decides the influence you have. Post your dick. Some people will be upset, some will be disgusted, some will be angry, and some people might even jerk off. The effect you have on an audience is heavily moderated by who they are, their pre-existing disposition, tastes, and bias. Now, I'm sorry, this might come as a surprise, but you're gay. You decide to post videos on YouTube with a rainbow flag in the background. Your vid is picked up by the recommendation system and millions see it. Mass influence. A torrent of homophobic abuse is posted as a result of how you presented yourself. It wouldn't have happened if you didn't put that flag up. It happened directly because of how you influenced the people watching you with your choices. Do you need to take responsibility for the behavior of your audience? Is their posting of homophobic abuse your responsibility? Can you say no without pinning it on pre-existing thoughts and bias or prejudice in that audience? And why would that count here and not elsewhere without appealing to just feelings or your own leanings or bias? If you're fully responsible for any effect or influence, you can't post anything publicly. You don't know who will see it, and you need to know that to even judge what kind of effect it will have. Anyone could click, almost any action could have almost any effect on someone. But hey, you know you have crazies, or the potential to have crazies watching you, so you have to account for that. Well, barrier or issue 3. I think it's actually very bad to have a standard where all media has to be molded around being safe to consume by insane people. Just as someone posting content online has influence on their audience, so too does an audience have influence on the poster, especially if the poster has aspirations of fame, an ego, is sensitive, whatever. Should I allow myself to be heavily influenced by nutcases? Is anyone going to say yes to that? And yet that's really what's being suggested. Behave this way, or these people will harass someone and it'll be your problem. No, fuck you. Go after them. They're not going to suddenly become an angel if I disappear. They're going to go express their sick little selves elsewhere, just not in your sight. And if I'm able to make this choice to say, no, I'm not going to let you decide how I am, why aren't the people who watch me also responsible for making that choice regarding me? Well, if they aren't, they're not a reasonable person, are they? I saw it on Twitter. Well, I was influenced. These YouTubers made me that way for a while. My actions weren't my own. Tight. Cool fact. If you got hit by a car, it would be like a pet getting run over. Very sad for your owners or keepers, but ultimately we didn't lose a person. And this points to what I think the standard should be. Would the content posted influence a reasonable person to act in a negative way? That's the question a content creator should ask themselves, and that's the standard they should be held to. You do not have a blanket responsibility for what the people who watch you do. That's unmeasurable and unreasonable. How do you know the degree of influence you had? Would you influencing them 1% of the way just across the line to do something make it your fault? This standard is a tool and a weapon. You point at the crazies, say someone's responsible for them, say you know what exactly motivated them, and therefore your target has to do what you think is right to fix that and take responsibility. No, they're crazy people watching too much stuff online. The problem is them. You are responsible for what you put out there though. But if it doesn't clear the bounds of would make a reasonable, maybe even good person do bad things, you're golden. But it's a slow, subtle warping of values, you see. YouTube videos can totally realign people's morals and rewrite their personality from the ground up. The reasonable person standard doesn't work because influencers turn their audiences into unreasonable people. They form communities that are tight-knit, and people derive their values from their experience in those communities. So we need influencers to guide their development into good people. That's a cult. But it's unavoidable! Alright, ban online media. I don't know what to say. If that's happening, then humanity can't handle this stuff. If it's unavoidable, we just need to get rid of it. Not to mention the fact that, actually, it's already too late. Your viewpoint on this very issue isn't even your own. It's just been arbitrarily molded by the media you've consumed. You're a beanbag chair. All this isn't to say that media can't have an effect on people. A convincing argument. Information you missed. Sure. Peer pressure. All right. but it's just seasoning on everything else that influences you. It's a tiny slice of the pie. You're asking someone who spat on a turd pizza to take responsibility for the whole thing tasting bad. Even if a content creator is lying to you, they're responsible for doing something wrong, but the bit that makes you believe them, you already had. Even the most egregious abuse of a position of influence takes two to tango. And I'd argue anything less than dis or misinformation, incitement or grooming if we want to go really extreme, that lies more heavily on the viewer. When it comes to managing the fucked up little minds of nasty people, the buck stops with YouTubers and streamers. You want these people to be the bedrock of society. If it's correct that they have that kind of control and responsibility, the answer is to take it the fuck away from them, not to make sure they're mind controlling the masses correctly. But, as usual, that's just another one of my harmful opinions.